heard this and I was told this. And, she would just sit and listen and be like, oh, that's good. That's great. And even, I grew up Catholic. So I used to go to catecismo, which is like, I don't know how to say that in English, but I used to go to
catechism, me too. I don't know how to say it either.
yeah, so I would go to the classes and we would reading the Bible and doing these things. And I would say, oh, God's saying that it says that this is actually the truth. And I'm hearing God saying this and that. And even then, Nereida was her name, and she'd be like, oh, that's good. You keep listening to God. Like, so it was as if it was, it's like that idea. A good way I explain to people, breathing is very normal, right? We don't go around talking about, look, I breathe or you breathe. Do you breathe this way? Do you breathe that way? Like, we don't do that. So for me, it's like in my conversations, it's as if like, this is just normal. This is day to day. God, these beings were my best friends and they still are. So it's like there was no differentiation in my mind, like, oh, you can't hear this and I can hear this. Let me tell you. It was more of like, oh, this is normal. This is like an everyday thing. So interesting enough, it wasn't like I was going out of my way to have certain conversations unless there was conversations as a child, right? Where you're like, oh, this person told me this, or this person told me that. And it was within those moments that those that were in the receiving side or hearing side, they made me feel that was normal, that, it's like
I love that. I love that, because a lot of people encounter whenever they're having experiences, the negation of the family, or the rejection, negation. And I'm so happy. I'm so glad for all of us, not only for you, right? That you received kind of that. It's normal, right? It's normal kind of vibe. So I'm super, super grateful for that, for your family support and everything. So, and when I read your bio and when I see your work online and everything, you're a speaker, you're a mother, and you do a lot of work with highly intuitive beings, or with what many people call them special needs. I'm a mom of a son that was labeled with autism. He's incredible. Emily, when he was 12, he was sharing nonstop what we're living today. He was sharing there's going to be a release of a virus. There's going to be people quarantined. Everything we've been living. He was at 12, and a lot of people, oh my gosh, they will come. He's autistic. He doesn't know what he's saying. He knew better than everybody. He was warning all of us, and he was talking a lot of stuff. I'm not even sure how big I want to go in the podcast, but I know you have connection with these beings. I know you serve the highly intuitive beings. Tell me about this part of your work, because right now our children, they need it so much more than ever before.
Yes, great question. And this is what I'm very passionate about right now. So on February 2019, I got visited by a group of beings, and I'm just even starting to talk about it, I'm getting chills. But so I was just waking up and they appeared around my bed, like a lot of beings, master presence, and they said, it's time. And when they said it's time, they started very quickly showing me visions that I've been getting since I was a little girl. And they've been visions that have carried out throughout my life. And a lot of them involved kids, and a lot of them involved like me, like seeing myself on stage, seeing myself delivering and sharing certain ways. And it's as if they were saying, like, the time has arrived for this to unfold. And they said to me that life has been preparing me for the work I'm about to do now. And that's why they've been training me all along. So, I have to celebrate that I've always felt on purpose. Like, I truly always felt on purpose when I started doing this even more. And in that moment, when they said that, they said, you've been getting trained to help the intuitive and sensitive children. That's what you've been getting trained for. And as soon as they said that, it was as if this clarity moved through my body, and I started really just crying, but it was a euphoric cry. And I went 2 days, just could hardly walk, because it was like a constant euphoric, and I would cry in euphoria, but it was so like a knowing. And along with that, part of why they said the time was now is because there was a greater wave of children that have been coming through in the last decade, and it's amplifying itself. And not only is that being amplified with the kids that are coming through in their own awareness. Now, I say this loosely because part of what they've taught me is that there's been many waves coming through, and Yvonne, you and I are part of those waves, and many of the listeners right now.
Yes.
there's been waves, and thank you. And what they're audibly saying, they're exponentially more in tuned because their brains are wired differently and they're purposely wired differently. And a lot of these kids, autistic, ADHD, and even just the gifted, and some of the kids that we're getting to work with, even if they don't fall in those spectrums, by the way, these kids, what I get shown is that their brain is different. The way that their neurons connect, the way that their the nervous system responds, and the sensitivities that they have are actually part of their superpower and part of the gift, and part of what is going to help us really recreate a different world and a different reality, different systems. And the timing was that they were telling me that the timing was going to be amplifying itself. And that's why in 2019, when this happened, they were saying it's time
Yes.
to create this.
Wow.
Kids. And again, going back to that awareness and celebration that your son is part of that beautiful wave.
Yes.
And I feel the same with my kids. My kids have gifts. They're telepathic. They're gifted. They're, and their wisdom just surpasses certain things that I'm, blown away. My oldest daughter is fully disabled, feeding tube, and can't talk, but she does a lot of work in the dream states, and she's just been my teacher. She's been my master teacher. So part of
Yes.
what this unfoldment is taking place is that these kids, they're still going to be children, and that's the beautiful part of it, right? It's like we love them in their infancy and in their development, but also owning that they are here to deliver something greater. And it's about creating thank you. They're audibly saying cultivating the environment that allows them to really own their true source in nature. What's required? It's required right now for the world that we are co-creating together, even more.
Absolutely. And it's so powerful what you're sharing. And it's, I really feel that these children, the parents, and that we are so blessed that I feel blessed that I'm the mother of this child, right? Of this young man, because I love him and I'm going to support whatever is required for him. I'm not a lot of people, they over a years they've called me like, I have a child with autism, or I have a child disabled. Like, why did this happen to me? I'm like, this is the narrative of why did this happen to us. Of course it's hard. Life is hard, right? And life is as hard or as beautiful or as flawed that we make it, but it's a privilege, it's an honor to walk with them in this life. So what are some of the things, Emily, that you help people with when they have where do people start? I know there's a lot of people that are going to hear the podcast that have a lot of the children with autism, disabled, etc. What is something, where can they start, to hear these messages, to understand the powerful frequency of these waves that you are talking about? And maybe talk a little bit, I know I'm asking too much, but talk a little bit more about the waves. What are the waves? And then we go into how do we pay attention to the waves of our children?
So I will, I'm going to ask them to just guide this part. Of course, they've been guiding the whole conversation in their own way. But so let's go ahead and start with, so for example, I just did a call last week. So I do call with the parents and I share guidance for the kids based on the collective things unfolding, but also where they're needing the most support with the current times. And here recently, the conversations, were about the importance of our languaging and for our children. And they use to be very, thank you, they're interrupting me. They're saying mindfulness in our languaging for our children, because they experience not just our words, but they experience who we're being. So, one of the biggest things that I start when I work with a parent, I'm coaching with them privately or doing here in the platform, is like, well, who are you owning as yourself? Because these intuitive and sensitive children, language is not their source of inspiration, and it's not their source of interpretation either. And yes, that's a quality of it, but it's not the main source. They experience themselves, they experience life, they experience us more than through the intellect, right? They can sense us in their bodies. They can sense us in our own movement by how they feel movement move through them. And for sure,
Right.
there's one of the things that I tell parents, and that's one thing that I'm focusing on helping parents. It's like, where can you feed your own alignment? Where can you feed your own intuition? Where can you feed your own connection? And it's not about seeing like, oh, I must be perfect. That isn't the conversation, because these kids are here not to learn from our perfection, but to learn how we move and choose alignment through our imperfections, right? So that they can understand that the certainty that they're here to awaken to is knowing that through the discomfort, through the chaos, through the overwhelmment that they may feel through their sensitivities, they too can choose to lead. They can choose and be in thriving, right? Because that's their destiny. Their destiny is
Right.
not to be making things perfect. That isn't their destiny. Their destiny is to own and understand that they are creators that can shapeshift not just themselves, but reality itself, to make love, light, and beauty through the imperfection. So, when you say, what do you start? Well, my invitation for all parents is like, where are you feeding your own self, your own alignment? Because that's the most powerful shift that you can make for your child. And then secondly, and it's very, very simple, but even a shift in consciousness and shift in focus. My daughter, within her disability, she reminded me daily, telepathically, and I get emotional, even through the beings, that the limitations were being seen in the human did not in any way describe her, right? That first, I was chosen. So for any parent who has a child with disabilities and autism, or they're struggling, like, you've been chosen, you've been destined to get through it. So it's like owning that arrival, that you'll get through it, that you'll thrive through it, that you'll figure it out. Like, just having that shift in consciousness that you're not meant to be defeated. It's okay if you feel defeated, but just lean into owning that the time will come where it will be figured out in a way and in a form that you will embody the woman or the man you need to be to move more into grace and ease. So just even that shift of awareness, because then we move into a vibrational state in which we're hopeful, which then leads us into a higher plane and into higher accessibility of what else is possible. And then the other shift of consciousness would be like, my child is not their disability, right? My
Yes.
child is not the label. My child is not the stories that are being told collectively or by teachers or by doctors. My child is not that. My child is greater than that. And it is my role to love that, to give my child permission to be that. Part of what I tell my daughter all the time, like, you are so special. And I celebrate her as a walking master, even though her body shows that it's not performing as our human minds would
Yes.
see as a master. She is a walking master because she's here doing the work, and she's showing up loving and joyful regardless of what unfolds. So she is in her mastery. So even just that shift of awareness is like, your child is in their own right and in their own way a walking master. And where are you choosing to see and celebrate it as well?
Yeah, I love that. And this is a message for everyone. You are not your disabilities. You are not your scars. You are not the story that the world tells about you, the diagnosis that you are given by the doctor. You are not that. That's something that it's happening as part of the human experience, but you are not that. We are far much more. We are that beloved I am presence, right? And I'm sure um, you talk a lot about this, so I'm grateful for your daughter, for her teachings, for you as her mother, to hold the space of the voice of the master, even if she cannot move her body like us, or they cannot talk like it even feels disrespectful for me to say talk like us. Like, what? There's not even a comparison. Everybody has their own journey and their own mastery to share, and I'm so grateful for that. So what's tell me about the upcoming waves for humanity. So what are you preparing for? What are you helping people with through what the waves that have happened already and the waves that are going to come, Emily? Because Everybody was telling me, "But freedom has won. We are not wearing masks. Freedom has won." I'm like, oh, it's like the waves are about to begin. That's all that I'm feeling. It's like all has been like a warm up for what's coming in this evolutionary stage of humanity. So, what do you feel? It's